Have you ever went back to a film and wondered why it never got a sequel? Well, that's what I'm going to be talking about with the 1997 film Eve's Bayou. If you're unfamiliar with the first film, it stars Samuel L. Jackson, Lynn Whitfield, and Jurnee Smollett. It follows the Batiste family in early 1960s Louisiana. It deals with themes such as infidelity, voodoo, interpretation, and perception. Now, this video is going to contain heavy spoilers regarding the first film, so if you haven't checked it out, I suggest you do. It's currently playing on HBO Max. If you are a fan of the first film, like myself, I really hope you enjoy this interpretation. Please leave some comments regarding some ideas that you might have for a sequel for this movie. So the first film ends with a narration by Eve, played by Jurnee Smollett. I envision we get a black screen at the very beginning of the sequel with that exact same narration, only to open up on an adult Eve sitting at a typewriter 20 years later. As she struggles to type, we do get a shot of a book next to the typewriter titled Eve's Bayou, with the author's name being Eve Allen. In the background, we can hear music playing in the other room along with tons of laughter. The door opens up and catches her attention, only to see her husband, James Allen, played by John David Washington. He's holding a bottle and he's dressed up, and he'll say something along the lines of, "You gonna just work all day, or you gonna come in here and celebrate with us?" She gives him a smile before she gets up and he approaches her. They share an intimate moment with a kiss. He takes her hand, and then they walk out of the room back to the party. Here we get introduced to Eve's new world. She's in New York, it's 1981, and I want this scene to parallel the first film, opening up with a party, celebration, and introducing a lot of central characters. At some point during the party, Eve's husband stops everything in order to propose a toast. This is a celebration of his beautiful wife and her newly best-selling novel, Eve's Bayou. Later throughout the night, the couple escape the party on the balcony where we get a beautiful skyline of the New York City lights. Eve expresses pressure to follow up her novel, while her husband calms her down, letting her know that, hey, you don't have to work so hard. Enjoy this moment. This is about you. Whatever comes, comes. I really want this scene to express to the audience the love and support that this couple have and what they've built over the years. They've only been married for 3 months, but they've known each other all through college. He thanks her for her love and support as he was going through his own struggles with the bar exam. He acknowledges her strength and her perseverance and doesn't know exactly where he would be without her. They both look forward to a bright future together as the scene ends with a kiss and these two looking down at the city lights. Soon after, we cut to a vision that Eve has. Now, this vision is going to be similar to the visions that we saw throughout the first film. A lot of the images in this vision are unclear, but we are presented with a flashback of her father being shot in front of her while she was a child. This causes Eve to wake up to find out that we are in the middle of the night and she is in bed with her husband. He briefly consoles her before quickly going right back to sleep. Eve, however, lays in bed, staring through the window at the moon. As we build up this couple's union, we eventually get to a scene where they walk the New York City night where they are suddenly approached by an armed gunman. Eve's husband tries to defuse the situation by complying to the gunman's demands. It only becomes a conflict when Eve is reluctant to give up her wedding ring. At this point, the gunman shoots her husband in the chest, and he flees. Eve is left there grieving over her dead husband's body in the middle of the street as we fade into a funeral scene. This causes Eve to put some of the blame on herself for her husband's death, and she's finding it extremely hard to deal with. We transition 6 months later while Eve is still grieving. She's isolated herself from the world, she's not working on any new novels, and bills are piling up as she cannot afford the apartment all by herself. Later that night, she's greeted with a phone call, and to her surprise, it's her older sister Cicely. They haven't spoken in years. Cicely offers some words of encouragement and asks Eve to come home for support. Although reluctant, Eve does. Eve is greeted at the airport by Cicely's husband, an officer played by Michael K. Williams. This guy is about 20 years older than Cicely. Due to her infatuation with her father as seen in the first film, we can interpret this that Cicely has an attraction to older men with some form of authority. Now, although Eve was anticipating meeting Cicely at the airport, she's not too put off by this encounter as the two embark on small talk on their way back to the Batiste estate. Now, we're back where we want to be at the Batiste house, where we get to connect with some of these characters that we fell in love with in the first film. There's definitely going to be some relationships here that need to be worked on and mended. Now, similar to the first film, the younger brother Poe did not have a real significant role. We're going to keep that theme here because there's not enough plot points and really to incorporate him in this story. So we'll soon learn that he is in Houston working on his own career. We also learn that Eve and Cicely's mother, Roz, played by Lynn Whitfield, passed away in 1975 of breast cancer. Her funeral was the last time that these two sisters spoke. We also have to deal with the absence of their grandmother, played by the late great Ethel Ayler, whose character in this case would have passed away in the late 60s. So the central characters that we have for this sequel are going to be followed by Eve, Cicely, and of course the best character in the first film, Moselle. played by Debbie Morgan. As these three women connect, I really want there to be an intense scene between Eve and Moselle as they speak about grief amongst lost husbands. If you remember in the first film, Moselle was reluctant to marry Julian Greyraven because of the curse placed upon her. We soon discover that he did pass away 3 months after their marriage. Because of all these severe setbacks, Moselle has decided to never remarry and has sadly accepted her fate that she would never find true love for the remainder of her life. This story resonates with Eve deeply, and although Moselle maintains a strong stature, it is very apparent that she is living an unfulfilled life. This is a fate that Eve sees for herself, and it scares her. Later on that night, the cheerful Cicely encourages Eve to join her for a night on the town to try to help her cope with her grief. That night, Eve has an encounter with an attractive jazz musician named Charles Dubois. This character can either be played by Michael B. Jordan or Lakeith Stanfield. You guys decide, let me know in the comments. He shows interest, he courts her. Although she is reluctant, she does start to warm up to his charm. It's been 6 months since she lost her husband back in New York, so she's slowly starting to open up to the idea of a new relationship. Especially since she has the fear of ending up just like Moselle, it's something that she's willing to take a chance on. The first film seems to have these hazy time jumps and lapses to where, 1 minute, these two characters are meeting for the first time and the next minute they are madly in love. I want to carry on that same thing with this sequel, to display Eve's and Charles's relationship. At some point in this movie, he does ask her to marry him. Although hesitant, she does accept his offer. This is a high point in Eve's life. She's getting over her grief, she has a new relationship, and it seems like everything is coming back together. As we get closer to the wedding, Eve is on cloud 9. However, there is another intense scene between her and Moselle that really opens up Eve's eyes. Moselle is extremely happy for Eve. She's happy that she was able to overcome her grief, and she wishes her nothing but the best on her new journey with her new love. But it's at this point where Moselle shares a story with Eve that calls back to the first film, when she shared the story about how her husband was murdered by her lover, Hosea. Moselle reveals that at the age of 15, she was raped by a boy who she thought loved her, and in order to retaliate, she placed a curse on him, which ultimately led to his death. This is when things really start to come together in Eve's head. She realizes that the curse that she placed on her father at the age of 10 is similar to the curse that Moselle placed on her rapist at the age of 15. She realizes that Charles could potentially be in danger if he marries her, so she has to find answers immediately. But before she leaves the room, Moselle does give a very subtle hint that she knew what Eve did 20 years ago that led to Louis Matisse's death. Desperate for answers, Eve goes to the only place she feels she can go in order to get this issue resolved. She goes right back to Elzora. Elzora was played by Diane Carroll in the first film, and she did an amazing job. I wanted to keep that same energy with this, being very vague, being kind of standoffish. And in this case, Eve is pleading, even placing guilt on Elzora. I was a 10-year-old child. You took advantage of the situation. You had all the answers as far as the severity that goes in to what I asked you to do for me at that time of my life. So you owe me that much. Elzora decides to help Eve, but she does it in a very vague way with one phrase. All she tells Eve is that the answer is in the soil amongst the dead. So at this point, Eve feels extremely lost. She has no idea how to interpret this message. She doesn't know how to decipher it. She finds herself, making up fights with Charles, putting a rift in their relationship, even to the point to where she calls off the wedding, not because of a lack of love, but because she is desperate to protect him at all costs. As we enter the third act for my interpretation for this sequel, Eve is going to go to a cemetery where she visits her mother and father's grave. She talks to them, and she apologizes to her father for what she is responsible for. We can hear the parades in the background and the people cheering. This is at a time where Mardi Gras is just now starting to begin. As Eve turns to leave the cemetery, she finds a man standing there staring at her. This is a Papa Legba-esque type of figure. I can see this character being played by Mahershala Ali, or even the same guy who played Papa Legba in the American Horror Story. He's drawn to her vibe and offers a word of advice. He pretty much tells her story to her, to the point to where she feels a little bit better of opening up to him. At this point, Eve repeats the phrase told to her by Elzora. The answer is in the soil, amongst the dead. At this point, Papa Legba laughs. He is very familiar with this phrase, and he's heard it time and time again. He tells her that the phrase is always given, but never completed. Eve questions this, in which Papa Legba finishes the phrase. He tells her the answer is in the soil amongst the dead, but if you can plant the seed, the dead will rise. Suddenly, everything becomes clear for Eve. She immediately runs back to the house, where she is greeted by Moselle smoking a cigarette on the porch. She asks Moselle why she never had children, in which Moselle explains that the rape that she endured at the age of 15 damaged her to the point to where she could not with child. Eve takes this information as further clarification. She finds Charles, who is still hurt. He's still reluctant to take her back, but she pleads to him her love, and eventually he accepts it. That night, the two are intimate. We fast forward to the wedding day where everybody is extremely happy, and Eve is 3 months pregnant. Eve escapes the party, and then she goes out and looks at the bayou. Similar to the last shot of her and Cicely in the first film, she is soon joined by Charles, who places his hand over her stomach, gives her a kiss, and then they stare out into the bayou as the film fades out.